Turtle Tracks podcast. This is your host, Brian VanHooker, and I'm here with two very special guests, Tom Waltz and Sophie Campbell, the writers behind the first 150 issues of the ongoing IDW Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles series. Both of you, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having us.
So you're both returning guests, but I thought, we're talking so much lately about, the future of Turtles, and that's super cool. But I kind of see this as a little bit more of, let's look back on this amazing series. So it's been, starting in 2011, this incredible comic book series that had such a deep, rich history to it, an amazing amount of continuity that not only is rare in turtle history, but in any comics ever, to go 150 issues with just two writers, it's insane and awesome. So I love this series. So I just want to kind of look back at favorite moments, highlights, things like that. I guess to get started, anyway, to be clear, this is being released right before 150 comes out, so we're not gonna have spoilers for 150.
Yeah.
But I've read up to 149, so if you can't talk about 149, if you don't know 149, then hang up now. But 150, there's no spoilers for that, and beyond there, obviously, there's no spoilers for anything beyond that. But this is really a look back at the most, literally, not just the most epic Turtle series ever, just because of how much you guys got to develop the characters in a way that no other medium has allowed. So, as a fan, first of all, thank you guys, because it's been amazing.
So, thank you.
Before we get going, can you guys hear my cat snoring? Is that going to be on the recording?
I hear no cat.
No, I woke him up. Can you see his foot sticking up?
It's funny you say that. When I was working at IDW offices for years, and John Barber would bring in his dog. John Barber was editor-in-chief. He had this little dog, and it would then once we went to COVID and we were working remote, he would have him in his office, and his dog snored so loud while we were working remotely, I kept checking my phone because I thought my phone was buzzing. It was the dog on the speaker the whole time.
Well, sometimes when I'm in group chats with my friends or whatever, and we're watching a movie or something, my cat will just snore and they can all hear it. So I always assume that it's working its way into podcast recordings and stuff.
I don't hear anything now. I think
he stirred a little bit, so he stopped snoring. But he'll start up again pretty soon.
Well, I'll start with the question. And speaking of cats, this will go back all the way to the beginning.
Yeah.
So early on, I think the biggest thing for me, probably the main thing that has affected my life from this Turtles thing is my relationship with Kevin Eastman. And so I had never met Kevin before I started working on Turtles. And the way I found out I was going to be working with Kevin was I was in IDW editorial. At the time, we had gotten the Turtles license. I was writing some other comics and obviously editing other comics, but I really was more like a cheerleader in the room for anything that was going on with Turtles. And I knew they were getting pitches from other writers, some big writers at the time, to present to Nickelodeon. But for whatever reason, I never knew why, Nickelodeon just wasn't seeing what they wanted. And I felt like at the time, maybe it was kind of like they didn't know what they wanted until they knew what they wanted. And so, because there was really nothing that was just gelling. And then, Kevin had reached out to Ted Adams, who was the boss of IDW at the time, and they were friends, and said, hey, I want to come back to Turtles. I might, do some co-plotting, some artwork, but I just want to get back into the mix, but I don't want to write it. And so literally I was just sitting in that meeting, hearing this, kind of just sitting there, and they looked at me and they said, do you want to write it with Kevin? And I said, yes, I'd like to write this. And, like any writer, any creator, even if you're not involved, your brain's always thinking, well, what would I do with this? What would I do with this? So the one thing that I knew was that if I was going to do anything different, it would be the reincarnation aspect. I always wanted to kind of tackle a new origin and I told Kevin, I said, no offense, Kevin, I always laugh when the Splinter's learning how to do martial arts as a rat in the cage. I thought that was
how dare you?
But it fit perfectly with everything that was going on at the time. But I thought, I'm gonna try something here. And so, as typical in comics, once they say, hey, you got the gig, they said, we need a 12-issue pitch by tomorrow.
Wow.
Okay, great. So I ran to my desk at IW, typed up, basic bullet points. The front end was pretty heavy. Kind of knew where I wanted to go to issue 12. But again, I was dealing with this reincarnation aspect that was new. And they had hinted that Kevin had kind of a story idea himself to start the series off with, a kind of a high-level plot. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, man, who am I to think my plot is going to be the one they pick. This is the guy who created Turtles with Peter Laird. It's going to be his. And I had been working a lot with a lot of pretty big stars at at IDW just based on licenses, including like Gene Simmons, who to this day is a friend of mine, but obviously very larger than life rock star. And I just kind of thought, okay, I'm getting my next rock star. It's going to be Kevin Eastman, and so I'll kind of follow his lead. So I put together my pitch, sent it to Nickelodeon, sent it to Kevin, got Kevin's pitch, and we've done Kevin's story since then. I can't remember, we did it in a special one-shot issue. I think it was like it might have been we might have done that in the 30th anniversary story. I'm not sure, but I waited to the next day nervously to meet Kevin and find out what he thought. And he walks in and he's holding my pitch and he says, "We're gonna do this. We can do mine later." He goes, "When the fans see the reincarnation," he said they're gonna shit purple bricks. So I was like, and we hit it off right from that moment. We've been like brothers ever since. He's probably my best friend here, in the world. And in San Diego, we spent a lot of time together. He lives here with his lovely wife and son. And so to me, that was the moment where I felt like, okay, maybe this can work. And then when Nickelodeon reacted positively to the story, that felt like, okay, it's going in the right direction. I bet you I can at least get 4 issues out of this thing. Hopefully people like my first 4 issues, and then we'll see where they go from there. And, 4 led to 12, led to, 100. But I don't think I could have done the 100 issues without having that comfort that I had going into number 1. And that comfort came from Kevin. I mean, in so many ways. I mean, Nickelodeon was always very supportive. They had certain ideas. I mean, my original reincarnation idea was a lot bigger scale. It was going to be like they reincarnated, they were like the Revolutionary War and Vietnam War, and I was thinking business. I was thinking, think of all the toys, how cool, I was thinking, like a turtle businessman, but, to their credit, Nickelodeon said, "Whoa, back off. That's a lot. We just need, one reincarnation, fueled Japan to now." And their only other note really was they wanted Raph to be separated from the Turtles at the beginning. So that was a Nickelodeon dictate, because they felt like this would explain why he was angry a lot of times, the why he felt a little isolated from his brothers, because that's how he started his life. And I like that they went in that direction, because they were thinking kind of the way I think, and I know the way Sophie thinks is the Turtles are already weird. I mean, just in general, it's a weird concept. And you can throw them into a lot of weird situations. And so the weirdness is just innate. What I like to do is find like some weird rational explanations, such as they are, for the weirdness, including like, why do they wear different colored bandanas and stuff? And so Nickelodeon was kind of thinking that way at the start too. Like, well, let's make sense of why Raph is angry. He shouldn't just be angry. Why? What is driving this? And so that was kind of the foundation for everything we did since then. And then, including, and I was mentioning Cats, Old Hob. Old Hob was an accident, which was a wonderful accident in the sense that it was never planned. But when I turned in my first script based on the pitch that was approved, editor-in-chief Chris Ryle at IDW at the time said, "Really like this, but I think you need one bad mutant, at least one foil for the Turtles." And he said, maybe, he goes, since Splinter's in charge, maybe it's like an old alley cat. So I go back to my desk and I thought, this is a good idea. I go back to my desk and I'm thinking, my first thought was like, the cat's like a devil. I don't know why I thought that. Maybe because my wife hates cats. She always says they're the devil. So I said that the cat's the devil. And Sophie, I love cats. Don't get me wrong. But and so my wife loves huskies. So guess what we got in our house? Huskies and fur. And so I sit down and I'm looking up different names. And this is another reason I'm so happy, things were great at the front. I looked up names for like the devil, different names, Lucifer or whatever. And Old Hob was one of the names. And I thought, that sounds cool, Old Hob. Because I thought he's an old cat, call him Old Hob. And so that's where Old Hob came from. Now, a little while later, and this is completely serendipitous coincidence, somebody said, "Oh, that must be based on Old Scratch." And I was like, who's Old Scratch? And they go, there was a character, Old Scratch. It was a toy, and he's a cat in the Turtle universe. And I had never heard of the toy, never heard of the name, never saw the character. But I thought, the universe is telling me something right now. At least, I was in the right devil territory for the cat. So, and it was just, at that moment, I felt like, and things like that just kept happening, where an idea would feel genius maybe on the outside. Like, boy, they really thought that. And it was really just something that we said threw out there. It worked. And then people thought, oh, that's because of XYZ from the past. And like, no, that just was I think how we tell our stories. Universe has a story, and we're the conduit, and it just comes through you sometimes. And that's just how it's been ever since. And it's been a wonderful experience. And I'll let Sophie follow up on this. But the best thing I think about the Turtles is it's such a huge ensemble cast of characters across multiple iterations. And once Nickelodeon said, "Go for it," they're all available. Do what you want with them. Part of the fun and almost difficult part of the fun because there's so many to choose from is cherry picking the right characters from those past iterations to fit your story, and then and having the opportunity to kind of remold them, modernize them, whatever the case may be. That for me is it's like going into a toy box and saying which one today. Yep, this one and this one, and then getting them in your story, and bringing them to a whole new audience. And so that to me, I think has just been my favorite aspect of it, other than working with wonderful people like Sophie, so many great creators along the way that have helped us along, taking our ideas and expanded on them, allowing us to take their ideas and expand on them. And I think that's why I think it's a family in the book, it's a family outside the book, and I think that's why it continues to as it has for so long.
What was that Kevin pitch that you were talking about? What was his?
Yeah, the brothers are racing across the rooftops, and then there's at one point I know they go in front of the firehouse, the Ghostbusters firehouse in New York, and I'm pretty sure that story ended up being in the 30th anniversary special, but I can't guarantee that. But I know it was in one of our anthology books.
Huh. Okay, I'll check. I didn't realize that. That's cool. I figured maybe we can go character by character. I mean, I don't know, Sophie. Before we go into that, though, Sophie, what was your attraction to this storyline? Like the kind of diving into this universe as it was kind of establishing. As a fan of the Turtles, who was a part of even some Mirage stuff, like I don't know, what attracted you to what IDW was doing with it?
I mean, I had been reading the series, before I was working on it. And I actually said no when Bobby came to me to take over. I said no at first because this is it's too much pressure. I feel like I'm too much of a fan at sometimes. Sometimes like I'm too invested, and I get, I'm much less of like a diva now. But I feel like, early on, like I would just get really bent out of shape if the powers that be were just like, like, oh, like what about this, or how about doing it this way or whatever. Like I'd be like, no, it has to be like my, it has to be like how I want the turtles to be. And so yeah, so I told Bobby no at first. um I can't even remember like what else I was working on at the time. But like, like a couple days later, I had been kind of dwelling on it, and I was like, I should really take that job. I should really do that. And so I went back to him and I was like, hey, is the job still open? He said, yep. And that was it. I mean, it was definitely, a lot of pressure trying to fill Tom's shoes. And just like, this is no, no shade against you, Tom, but I felt like in your last arc, you kind of just like, threw all these bombs out, and then you were like, ah, I'm out. you know, and like, like one like literal bomb, the mutagen bomb. And then there was like, Jennica had just been introduced, and Splinter is dead. And so like I come in, I'm just like, shit, I gotta like, okay, I have to like address these things now. Like what happened to all those mutants? Like what are the turtles doing with Splinter dead? So I had to kind of like, pick up the debris, so to speak, of like Tom's final arc. And
but the irony there is when we did that, and you can blame Bobby Curnow, who was editing at the time for the mutagen bomb. That was his idea. But
really?
the thing is that at the time, when we knew we were expanding the mutant side of the cast, Sophie's name was the first one. Like, who could handle this? Who can handle this correctly in a way that'll service the story and satisfy the fans? And it was always Sophie because we always knew that was one strong, and because the story was going to have to slow down. Like Sophie's right. There was bombs going off everywhere. So it was kind of one of those things where we're like, we need to step back. And then, and as wonderful as Sophie illustrated the Northampton arc, which was the same idea. I mean, after City Fall, Northampton was like, decompress, everybody stop, take a
Yeah,
step
you
back,
have
deep
to.
breath. And that was by design. So was Sophie coming in at 101. This was by design. Bobby said, now we need to do Northampton again, but now it's in Mutant Town. And we're gonna have to show, the ramifications of all these bombs. And Sophie came in like with her bomb vest on and took care of it.
Right, right. Yeah,
Yeah,
it was tough though. And I feel like my initial pitch to Bobby, it was much crazier because like at first I thought I was only going to do 12 issues, like that was the original plan. And I was just like, I only get 12? Like, okay, I have to like cram in everything that I've always wanted to do into 12 issues. So my original pitch was like, there was giant monsters, there was time travel, like Hob dies. I had Raph like stab out Hobbs' other eye at one point or something. Just like all, just all this stuff. It was just like way too much. And then um but it worked out, because I did do more than 12 issues and I didn't have to cram everything in all the time. So that was nice.
Yeah.
but now we know what happens in 150 is Hob loses the other eye. So that's spoiler alert.
That was something for whatever reason I really wanted to do. And, like, partly it's like the gorehound in me, where I'm just like I want like eyeballs getting stabbed out left and right. But
Yeah, they say to me, I'm the old Marine, and they'll say, "You probably want things more violent." I go, "Have you spoken to Sophie?"
I know, right? I know people are like, like oh, like Last Ronin is like, this is so violent, blah blah blah. Like how come the ongoing's not that violent? And I'm like, well, they don't, because I tell them what I want to do, and they're like, that's disgusting. That's way too much.
But they do compromise sometimes, and I'll remind people, yeah, it's not like Last Ronin level violence, but Last Ronin is its own thing, and definitely,
Yeah, it's different.
but they do let us do stuff sometimes where they do surprise me. The biggest first surprise was when they allowed us to show the Foot Clan in feudal Japan, executing the four
Right,
brothers,
right.
and not that you see it, but just the very idea of it to me was like, this is pretty gritty, and almost worse because like any good horror movie, sometimes the scariest stuff is the stuff you don't see.
Yeah, for sure.
Then you fill it in with your own twisted thoughts. Most people probably fill it in even more gruesome than it was, and that's when I was like, okay, I think there's some things we can do here. And Sophie's right. Sometimes it's difficult to navigate when you can't. Leo's got swords, but
Right.
you got to find the right time where you can actually use the blades. And that's just part of the nature of this story, which is more like teen plus. But in a way, it's challenging, but I kind of like the challenge because you are trying to find a way. I guess like if you were writing Batman, I just wrote Wolverine for Marvel, and he can just stab and cut all he wants.
Right, right.
But Batman would be a different challenge because he's not going to kill people.
Right.
And so I think finding that maybe not necessarily non-violent, but non-lethal way to solve a problem, I think is good practice as a writer, but also maybe a good message to some of the younger readers that there's always a way that doesn't have to involve like a final solution. But I also know that there's times where, and I'm sure you said there are a million times like I have, Sophie, and go, I just wish you could just cut that guy down.
I
Just
know, yeah.
just stab him. But then I'm like, okay, but that's not the story we're telling here. I'll leave that for Ronan. He can
It's
just
it's also like, I'm kind of like going off on a tangent here, but that sort of thing is also like kind of stressful for me, that they can't take out villains, because it's like we're constantly introducing villains. And so then it's like, okay, well, like where do they go at the end of this arc? I got to come up with something, because I can't just kill them like like at the end of a movie or whatever. And then it's like we have all these villains that are like still alive, kind of like waiting in the wings. And it's like each villain that is still around, it kind of just like weighs on me a slightly, just a little bit,
that's why when Splinter was kind of the exception to the rule, and Jennica a couple
Yeah.
times. She started as an assassin, so it was funny when we were able to have him kind of give those orders. I was kind of like Splinter was like kill, kill, kill.
Yeah,
I
that's
thought, oh, he took
cool.
it out of his system. But no, and then there was times we killed a villain where I felt bad. So we spoiler if anybody hasn't read the first 150 issues, but there was one point we had a villain that actually cherry picked from the Four Kids show, and it was the one where they were in the future. I can't remember what it's called now, but there was the Four Kids version, and they went into the future, and there was a guy named Darius Dunn
Oh, right.
in the Street Phantom. So I brought them in at I think issue 51 ish. I brought them in, and just when I felt like Darius was getting kind of his legs, and he started to feel like the Kingpin character for our book. We had Splinter ordered Jennica to assassinate him, and so then he was dead, and I was like, dang, I kind of wanted to do more with him. And again, the universe says, well, I'm going to give you an opportunity because we did a second Turtles Ghostbusters crossover. And the first thing Eric Burnham, co-writer, sat down and talked about was who was going to be the ghosts. And I go, Darius Dunn.
Oh, that's cool.
Darius Dunn, because I'm not done with him yet. Let's bring him back. I've got a dead guy that we can use, and it working out really well.
That's
In that
hilarious.
crossover.
Meanwhile, I'm trying to think. I think the only God, did I get to kill anybody in my run? I got to kill Man Ray. I know, maybe he'll be back at some point. But like when I wrote that, having the weasels kill Man Ray, I was just like, yes, this rules.
And when I read it, I was like, oh,
I know.
holy cow.
Like children assassins or whatever. Loved that. I think that was it though. I don't think I killed anybody else. I remember. Anyway.
I can't think of her name. The Triceratops Magenta.
Oh,
See?
Sari.
So many characters. I was gonna say Siri. So many characters. She took out.
Yeah, she killed Terrell. Yeah, that was great. I love that. I don't know why I'm so bloodthirsty. Like, I don't know where that comes from. I don't know, but I'm always like, like my original thing for Dr. Barlow and like the Venus Punk Frog arc. Like I was just like, oh, they should just kill him. They should just like rip his head off or something and disembowel him, or I had a thing where an ending where like Leatherhead just like tore him limb from limb. I felt like that was like just desserts or whatever. But then it kind of went through permutations, and like Charles was just like, well, I don't know why you're into like murder so much. So like maybe he's still alive at the end. He just goes to prison. I'm like, yeah, all right.
That guy had it coming too. I mean, like he was pretty.
I know.
You really don't like that guy.
Like he's kind of like a tragic character because he's obviously very damaged or whatever, but he's also just like not a good guy,
But Sophie bringing up the frogs, that's a good example of the comic kind of driving the brand in some ways. Because Sophie brought the punk frogs in so successfully. I was working on a video game called Splinter Fate that was for the Apple Arcade, which, by the way, news for everybody, is being ported. I know at least to the Switch, but I think the other consoles.
Oh, I can play it. That's the only one I have.
Yes,
with new content too, I believe.
Yeah.
But I remember in the middle of writing that game with a great company called Super Evil Megacorp. We were writing, and then the dictate came from Paramount that you got to get the frogs in there, and the frogs.
That's cool.
They were all Sophie's designs and her story. Said we need punk frogs in the story because we really want to bring them back into the universe, and I know that was influenced by what Sophie was doing.
Oh, that's
I love
a frog in the new movie too. I wonder if that was part of it too.
Yeah, it was funny because all of a sudden we weren't even talking about the punk frogs when we first, outlined the game, and what characters were going to be in there, and we had like Baxter Stockman in the background, all the usual suspects, and then all of a sudden they were like really pushing for the punk frogs, and it made it more fun, and I'm hoping there's more content with them as that game is ported.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, I love doing I never really cared for the frogs that much in the old version. Like they're just these like kind of Hawaiian shirt wearing guys. It's like weird.
I always thought that those were that's what the Turtles would be if they didn't have Splinter. Just these lazy jerks.
Right, just these like losers, right?
And they would just be these lousy characters.
Yeah, and I feel like, like obviously in the old cartoon, like they're like Shredder's minions or something.
for like a day.
right?
Yeah. And then like, oh,
Yeah,
there's
because like
like dopey Forrest Gump characters too. Like they're
he named he
dumb.
named them after like dictators from history or like or whatever. And I just felt like I just felt like they should like why didn't Shredder train the punk frogs originally? Like he's just like here's some weapons,
Yeah.
kill the turtles, and it's just like
Stuff.
kind of
And then like a day, he's like, go get the turtles. Like, of course,
right, yeah, and
we
there's like
have
here's
no
some weapons
training.
and some like board shorts. Go kill the
And like,
turtles.
But see that
what?
again. That look how awesome they are now. That was one of my favorite things. Was again we're talking about other creators that have worked on the series over the years and side projects. So the original Easter egg for Bebop and Rocksteady was when Brian Lynch, the awesome Brian Lynch, was writing the early Macro series,
Yeah,
and you
love
see
that.
them kind of in the back of the raft. They're just in their human form, and we weren't even talking about Bebop and Rocksteady at that time. They weren't even on a radar. But when I saw that, of course, you started getting this little thing itching you in the back of the head, like where can I bring them in? And the one thing we've been disciplined about, I'm so happy we have, and I think it's key to the success of this book running as long as it has, is we won't. There's nothing that's gonna be done for fan service at all ever. As much as we'd like to, sometimes we step back. If a character doesn't work for a story, if it doesn't make sense, just including like say for example Jennica mutating, we were talking about that from the beginning, almost early on. We wanted a fifth turtle, a female turtle. So many little girls come up to conventions, and so for all the haters out there who get mad about this stuff or whatever they want to call it, woke SJW, I don't even know, everybody puts labels on everything. I just wish everybody would grow up. But here's the key:
Yeah,
we did that because there were so many young girls would come to shows and go, hey, why aren't there any girl turtles? Why aren't there any girl turtles? And at that point, and again, credit to Sophie for turning the Venus kind of conundrum around in her book. Venus was kind of off what's how to say it. Just don't talk about Venus at that point. They weren't ready to kind of circle back to
right.
Venus.
Cross that bridge.
Yeah, yeah. So let's figure out how to do that later. But the Jenica idea what came later, but the seeds were planted earlier. But we didn't do it, and we wouldn't have done it if we didn't feel it was crucial to the story. It made sense. And it would work, and it did. And so like with Bebop and Rocksteady, we finally realized in City Fall, hey, this is a chance for Karai to step up and show how smart she is, and she's gonna fight, fire with fire. She's gonna make mutants too. And we thought Bebop and Rocksteady, it's kind of the old story where they're always willing to be the guinea pigs, no matter what. And so bringing them in the story was fun, but they've gone to a whole new level in fandom because they're always kind of the doofuses that followed Shredder around, and they're still doofus, but they're like Hawk powerful, which
Right.
also is hard to write. It's hard to have them get defeated. I'm always like those are the most pressured stories for me. Is like, okay, how am I going to beat Bebop and Rocksteady this time? Usually it ends up them beating each other up. But then when I can't think of the creator, when they did Bebop and Rocksteady Destroy Everything,
Bates
that
Motel.
was
Ben and Dustin.
Ed and Dustin.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite stories we've done
Me too.
in our whole turtle. I love that so much. I laughed so hard, but it made me feel like Secret History of the Foot Clan made me feel. So when Secret History of the Foot Clan came out, that to me was kind of like made me feel like the reincarnation story was a legitimately good idea. That I was lucky to have or bring to the mix. The universe gave it to me because I never thought at that scope. And when Eric Burnham and Mateus Santaluco came in, they brought that story. It was like it changed things for me because I thought we're telling a story that's inspiring other people to tell even greater stories. We're going in the right direction. We have to be, because I read that and I was awestruck because I was like, well, I know somewhere in there was my original idea, but this is beyond anything I'd hoped for. And from there, I was able to build from what they constructed. And it was the same thing with Bebop and Rocksteady Destroy Everything. I go back to that all the time every time I read Bebop and write Bebop and Rocksteady because I love how they wrote them so much.
Yeah.
That I want mine to feel like the fans like that one felt to me when I read it.
Yeah, Tom, I'm glad you brought up the whole like little girls at conventions thing because I have a 9-year-old daughter and like she's obsessed with Venus. She's obsessed with Jenica. Like we have, I'm not a customizer, but I've like had to make Jenica figures, Lita figures, for my daughter to play with, just so she can enjoy these characters in the way that they need to be like played with. So like I have like customized Jenica, customized Lita, and all these things because I have a 9-year-old girl who's like, where's the girls? So she's found them and like made them an essential part of our
Absolutely.
It makes me happy. I mean, and I know Sophie was talking about the bombs that I left, but one of the bombs I'm glad I left her was Jennica because I think Sophie took Jennica in directions I might not have thought of. That I think it made it a more well-rounded, a larger character than quicker than I thought she would be, and so and very popular. I mean, Jennica is very popular at conventions. People come up to us all the time, and to the point where I always laugh when because we all understand as fans. There's different iterations. She doesn't exist in anything besides this IDW version. But people will sometimes say to me, "How come the girl's not on there on a picture or something at a convention?" Like they just assume, and it has nothing to do with IDW. It's some old picture or other turtle merchandise. And to them, they're confused as to well, why isn't she there? And I go, well, she's really not in that universe. And I'll say, but she's the fifth turtle. So for me, the most exciting time with her was walking into a comics and stuff one time, and there was turtles merchandise. There's always I dare anybody to go to any store pretty much and not find some kind of turtles merchandise from somewhere in the turtles history. But I looked and I was like, wait a minute, and there was Jennica on the cover of the glass. She was one of the collection, and I thought
What?
that's
Wait,
crazy. That's
wait,
crazy.
what is this? What
They're
the
like a like drinking glasses. They look like
Oh,
pint beer mugs or something.
right. I'm gonna look that up. I want
Yeah,
those.
and I just stumbled on it, and I went, "Wait, that's Jennica." And then they had her individually, and then they had one glass that was all the five turtles together, and it was some of the
Like
early artwork. And I was like, "That that that's the kind of thing that hits you." It's sort of like walking into. I was just in Mexico City, and I was just at La Mole convention. Awesome convention. Mexico was wonderful. The fans were wonderful. But if you go to Comic Con or you go to New York, you expect to see like especially at the IDW booth. Matter of fact, I know it's going to be there because I'm told ahead of time. Giant like Last Ronin turtle displays, right? You kind of expect to see it there because they're there to sell it. I got to the convention on a Friday just before I was supposed to sign, before the fans came in, walked on the main floor in Mexico City, and it was like a turtle gasm. I swear it was turtles everywhere, and there was just this massive booth with the Ronin, and all, just our artwork, and I choked up a little bit. It hit me. It hit me pretty hard because I was just like, this is so much bigger than us, and that we're so lucky and fortunate to be part of it and maybe be part of its creation. But again, I just feel like must have done something right in one of my lifetimes. So this lifetime, I can kind of enjoy this kind of turtle renaissance. And I will say this, I felt it. You can feel it there. You can feel it at conventions. Turtle energy is not. It's people are saying, oh, it's big right now. I go, no, it's growing. That's how it feels right now. It just feels like it's getting ready to go crazy again here in the 40th anniversary. And I always say to Kevin, what does it feel like that you captured lightning in a bottle over and over and over again? To do it once in your life is amazing. Just to be part of it over and over again. And he says the same thing. He goes, I just go where the turtles take me. And that's how it feels now.
yeah, that's great.
I had a few things I want to ask you guys. Sophie, I'll start with you for this one.
Sure.
Do you have a favorite original character that you've created that like you've really grown attached to, or that you want to talk about?
Um, I mean, I co-created her with Tom, but I feel like Koya is still
Oh yeah.
my baby. Um, she's just like, I love drawing her. I love writing her. I like how violent she is, but she's also like kind of an idiot. And, I love writing her just like, being all like bombastic, like I will bathe in your warm blood, stuff
And,
like that.
and everybody's like, yeah, yeah,
Love,
come on, boy.
right. Everyone's like, yeah, okay. Whatever. And Bludgeon is just like so patient with her. Yeah, so I love Koya. Who
What
else
made you
do I?
take your wings away? What made you do that? Curious.
That was Tom. Or
Oh, it
well,
was Tom.
Yeah,
I Tom
it was.
kind of did it.
Yeah, we kind of did it together, and I think Bobby was kind of in that mix. We knew we wanted to in that battle. Matter of fact, that is the first time where I realized, was second time with Bebop and Rocksteady. I was like, how the? So I was so worried
Right.
about beating Bebop and Rocksteady. How do we get them to beat each other? That I was really not thinking about Koya and Bludgeon. So I remember in the original pitch, it was probably like they get defeated. That's probably all you're right in the thing, and then you say, I'll figure it out when we get there.
Right.
Um, but those were things I think kind of evolved as we were writing it, and we were going back and forth with Bobby, and then getting artwork. Actually, I'm ahead of myself, aren't I? I'm thinking of see how many stories there are. So this was
Well, I was thinking of issue 50 where Leo cuts off her feathers or
yeah,
whatever.
50, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
feathers
Yeah.
So
that long?
yeah,
No, really?
yeah.
Yep.
No
So,
shit. I thought it was way
It
more.
was we cut off the feathers so we could ground her, and that was what that whole idea was, just like blinding Bludgeon.
right.
But we had this idea for Bludgeon that Bludgeon would kind of become like Daredevil eventually, where he could use his senses other than his eyesight. It was Sophie's idea to magically return those feathers to Koya, and I thought that was awesome. I
Yeah.
thought that was awesome.
Yeah, because I felt like, I wanted when I worked with Eric on TMNT Universe, like I didn't want, like so many characters in, like monthly comics, like they can't change,
Yeah.
or if they do change, it gets like reverted.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't, like I wanted Bludgeon to stay blind. I wanted Koya to, you know, stay without her wings in some form. And then,
Mm-hmm.
I thought about like oh, she should just be like, she should just learn how to fight without flying or something like that. But I felt like, she would never rest
Mm-hmm.
until she would like regain this part that was like taken from her. And so I was, like I didn't want her wings to just regenerate or something, or like should they be like cybernetic wings or
Yeah.
something? But then all the Karai's past stuff was so like magic oriented.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, no, like what if she makes a pact with like this, ancient talisman or whatever that gives her these wings and kind of like, there was some stuff, some hints that like the talisman was like making her crazy or something, but like we never really got around to following up on that. But yeah, I think the magic wings are cool. They're easier to draw for one thing. It's definitely a
Good
plus.
reason.
If I had to pick one, I mean, obviously Jenica is very important to me. I love Old Hob. I
I
think Old
love all
Hob
that. Yeah.
is a character that I've always enjoyed a lot because he firmly exists in those gray areas. The perfect example of best intentions, but not necessarily the best way of going about meeting those best intentions. But there's characters that are original to our series that I didn't create that I really like a lot too, and one of them is Harold Liljum, and that came from Brian Lynch and also Kara Lewis, the detective, and they were basically going to be like kind of throwaway characters in those macro series. But as soon as I was reading those, and then I helped Brian script the Donatello one that first introduced Harold. But that's all based on his idea. I just was in there to help script it out a little bit. The the moment I read them, I was like, these are characters are going nowhere. They're staying. I like them way too much, and they're not even mutant characters. But I just felt like Harold was like, to me, that he's like the perfect friend and foil to the turtles. He's just I feel like he's kind of like almost the fourth wall voice calling out how crazy things are sometimes. Like,
Right.
why do you keep getting in trouble? Just stop. My arm hurts when I do this. Stop doing that. So that's why he's always calling out the turtles, saying, "Is it ever easy with you guys? Just come on now," and you pull everybody in. But I just thought it was so funny, just the little how he says words wrong, his mannerisms. It was all like right there in that first story, and I was like, I'm keeping this guy. He's not going anywhere. And that's how Jennica came about too. Jennica was never meant to be a permanent character, never even meant to have a name. Jennica was this is how we pitched that first arc after 50. We were saying Splinter takes over the Foot Clan, and of course there's going to be those that don't want him in charge. And Jennica, we said there's this foot assassin who teams up with Darius Dunn against Splinter because she feels like it wasn't even a she. It was just at that point the assassin feels like that Splinter will be too peaceful to run the Foot Clan, and so it's kind of a power play. Almost like in Dune when Paul first runs into the Freeman and he's got to kind of have that little battle to prove he belongs, right? And so we wrote that, and then I thought, you know what? I was thinking he'll probably unmask the assassin. This is just how the stories come about sometimes. And stuff. He'll probably unmask the assassin after he beats him. So I said, well, how about it's to her? That would be, let's have it be a female assassin. And then for whatever reason, I thought, what is the last thing you would expect? Some Japanese Foot Clan. What would be the last thing you expect? And I thought, what if she looked like Tank Girl? That's exactly what I thought. I go, what if she had like blonde, hair, buzz cut, nothing that you would expect. And my idea being that let's show that the Foot Clan is everything. It's not just some group from Japan. It's like just like in the movie, the original movie. Even some of these people are kids from off the street,
Right.
And again, Brom Revel. I'll come back to this, but I'm just jumping ahead. This is where Brom Revel told her origin story. I didn't know the story he was going to tell, and I said, "This is amazing." His story was amazing to me,
Yeah.
and he built in details I hadn't even considered because again, she was supposed to be a throwaway character, just a plot point. And I said, well, if they have blonde hair, she's probably Scandinavian. My family's Finnish, Swedish. I said, let me go online to Dr. Google. I go on Dr. Google and search on common female Scandinavian names. And I just started going through them. The only rule I was given was it can't start with an A because we've got so many A's. Alopex, Angel, April. They're like, no more A's.
Yeah,
They go back off on the A's.
that is true. I never thought about it.
And so I said, I saw the name Jennica, and I just thought it looked cool. I like the aesthetic of it with the K in there and the two. For some reason, it looked artful to me. So I thought, oh, we'll just go with Jennica, and then so we had the moment where he unmasks her, and by all means could have killed her for her being a traitor and the mutiny she was trying to cause, but instead he gives her the second chance, and it was the first sign like this is a whole new leader of the Foot Clan. This isn't Shredder, who probably would have just taken her head off for trying to take back the crown. And from there, it became a thing where I gave her a face, gave her a name, and I realized she's not going anywhere either. But never until later did we realize she was going to be the fifth turtle. I just always felt like she would be the nice fill-in, because we knew the turtles were going to start pulling away from the Foot Clan, which they, because the whole story is about how power corrupts. Splinter said, "I'll take over the Foot Clan. That way I can control the bad guys, and that way by controlling the bad guys, they can't hurt my family, and because they're always trying to hurt my family." But of course, if you become a crime lord to a criminal organization, you're probably going to end up doing crimes. It kind of goes hand in hand. And so that's the story we were telling, kind of almost like Breaking Bad kind of thing, where it starts here and then just gets out of control. And but Jennica became a character that I just kept feeling like, oh, I can go back to her. She fills this role, this kind of the new Chunin role, the new second in command as his family pulls away. And she kind of represented a lot of the turtles. She has a kind of silly side, but like Mikey, but she's smart. But there's some anger from her past that's in there. But she's also got this, natural leadership ability as well. So she was kind of all the turtles in one, kind of fulfilling, I think, filling that hole when they left Splinter. So she kind of moved in. And as I realized we were writing her, more and more, I said, she's like his daughter now. She's like a surrogate daughter to Splinter. And then it was like, here's our turtle. How do we make her into a turtle? And then it took us probably another 3 years because Sophie and I worked together on her design years
earlier
before she showed up in the. Oh yeah. We knew we wanted to do it, but again, until it was right for the story, we weren't gonna do it.
I mean, I think that's one of the highlights of the entire series is I think the reason why it lasted for 150 issues is because you guys paced yourself. I mean, we don't get the punk frogs in year one. We got them later on when it was like, oh, this makes sense now because you've got all these mutants roaming the streets doing all these different kinds of things. Or like we didn't get Bebop and Rocksteady for a while. Like I think very smartly we're like never kind of just like, oh, hey, here's a team of 35 mutants that were every toy in the 80s, right? Like I'm sure there's a temptation to do that at times where it's like, I throw a bunch of characters at you. But like it was really smartly paced throughout the entire run by both of you. Here's a question for you. Do you have I'll start with Sophie, a favorite character like where you had a new take on them, like plucked from obscurity character?
Does Venus count as obscurity?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, she was, yeah, totally.
I think what you did with Venus was the miracle because I didn't think we'd be able to turn anybody around.
I know. Yeah.
I mean, it's rehabilitation of characters. I mean, I think that's
like I love a good hard luck case or whatever where like
there is few better examples
like okay, so like everybody hates this character, how can I like that that like draws me to a character if
Sure.
everybody hates him, and I'm like, oh, how can I like make this character quote unquote cool, like not that the original Venus, not that she isn't great, but yeah, it's just that. And like I had been trying to get Venus in the series like prior to that, like for like a few years, and Lita was supposed to be Venus originally.
Right.
Like I had written her as Venus, and then there were like some, we were like in issue 3 or 4 or like 103, 104, and then like all of a sudden they were just like, you can't use the Venus name, and I'm just like, oh, so why do I have this character then? Like, I guess I got to come up with a new name for her, and like and so and that's why future Lita has magic, and why she has this like yin yang tattoo, because it was supposed to be like Venus was, she has like the yin yang on her belt or whatever.
Was she
Um,
gonna be was your Venus that version, was she gonna be like albino and look like that? Or
yeah, yeah, she was gonna just be like exactly what Lita like ended up being. She
sure.
was gonna be that character. And like that's why Lita has like the fan weapons,
Oh
the,
yeah,
war-
sure.
the war fan weapon, yeah. But I think it worked out okay, with
Yep.
Lita being like her like original thing. But yeah, so anyway, and then a couple years later, I think Tom, like you were talking about using Venus in, was it Armageddon Game? Like,
Well, she was, because we knew she was in play at that point. So
right, yeah, because you were like,
where does she fit in here? Yeah.
yeah, like you were like, oh, so this superhero team comes in from another dimension, and Venus is one of them. And so I was like, wait, what? We can use
Yeah,
Venus?
no, yeah, you're right. It was going to be Venus might have been a part of it, and maybe Ninjara.
Yeah, it was something like
We were
that. It was
talking about, yeah, because when we were throwing out ideas, and the main reason, and it's good that Sophie brings this up with Armageddon Game, this is where I was so happy Sophie changed her mind about something. Armageddon Game came about, and this will get back to your question you asked too, because Sophie was getting pretty busy with creating her own stuff, all kinds of other things going on, and she was saying, I might have to step away because I've already gone beyond what I expected to do.
yeah, and like I
Everyone's
was a
trying to
little,
advance it.
yeah, like I was a little burned out.
Yeah.
There were a couple times where I tried to quit.
And,
But
and Bobby came to me and said, "Oh, well, I'm talking to Sophie, but in the meantime, if she does step away, do you want to come back on board?" And I said, I missed writing the ongoing at that point. We were in like the midst of Ronin craziness, but I said I do miss the ongoing a lot. And I would love to write that, but I felt like I tried to think as a fan first, and I thought, well, but the old guy coming back, what's the news there? Really, that's how I felt, and that's not to be self-deprecating or saying I'm insecure or anything. I just felt like as a fan, I'm like, what is that? What we want to do? And then I said it can't just be that. I said there's got to be something bigger. So I talked to Bobby about it, and I said, what if we do like an event, and it's like an 8-issue event for me to come back to, and then we'll see who can, and that's kind of the selling point. And then another writer can come in and take over, and that could be the next news. And so I started, and he goes, well, what do you got? And that's when I put together the idea, the overarching idea for the Armageddon game, and shared it. And then Sophie writes, I heard you're planning on doing an event. I'd love to see what it is. And then I showed it, and Sophie's like, I want to be part of this. I want to
yeah,
stay.
like I can't.
I go,
Yeah, I can't leave now.
yeah. And I said,
look at
even
this.
better. This
Yeah.
is even better because now we can make it an event, have it be its own event series, coinciding with the main series, and maybe having like we had the Alliance ancillary series, kind of like the big two always does. Civil War. The one I'm working on with Marvel right now is called Blood Hunt. And it's about vampires. The main book is Blood Hunt, but I'm doing.
Oh, I've heard about this.
Yeah, I'm doing Wolverine Blood Hunt, and then there's there's a Union Jack Blood Hunt. So they all the other stories have kind of their Blood Hunt tie-in. And I said, let's do it. Let's go big two and do a big event like that. And that's how that came about. And going back to your question, and Sophie kind of mentioned them. There's so many characters that we've revamped that I've loved over the years. A million of them. Bebop and Rocksteady I mentioned. Angel, Angel was a character who became nobody in our book because what happened was I used to write superhero prose stories. That's how I started writing in kind of this genre for a company called Cyber Age Adventures. And I had a character named Ravina who's similar to Angel. And I decided, you know what? I think I'm going to bring Ravina in. She fits a nice storyline here with the Purple Dragons. And I think she's a straight, cool kind of character that could work to the point where Kevin even has a artwork, some original artwork where he did a design of Ravina next to one of the turtles. And it says Ravina and Mikey or whoever he drew her next to. And when I presented it to Nickelodeon, to their credit, it was Joan Hilty was working at Nickelodeon at the time. She said, "Look, I like this character." She said, "But you do realize," and I did realize, if you include this in the book, it belongs to Viacom. It belongs to Paramount wasn't involved at the time, but it would belong to Viacom because that's just how licensing works. You put it in their book, it's theirs. And I said, yeah, but it's okay. I don't know if I'm ever going to get back to her, even though part of me was like, oh, what if I ever just. And then it was Joan who goes to the handy wiki, and she goes, well, there's this other character from the 4Kids show called Angel, who she's younger. She goes, but toward the end, she's a little older, and she kind of might fit that role. And I looked at her and I said, that's it. That's the one I want. Plus, I get to keep mine. I get to keep Ravina. So that's how Angel came in. And then we decided that, again, totally one of those things that were by accident. We had her go hang out with Harold, fight, in his lab, and be able to kind of just naturally understand the technology and use the suit. And that's where we were. There's our nobody, and this is our nobody suit. And here's a story I want to tell. Right away when she was introduced as nobody, of course, what were we getting? I was getting like that I'm woke SJW, turning everybody into a woman. Where I'm like, if you ever look at the world, there's different genders. There's a lot of different people out there. It's not just a bunch of dudes. So that's my sisters. I had five sisters, all strong. Matter of fact, my sister was so good at volleyball, I was afraid to play against her because she'd smash my face in. But the thing is that to me, that was a perfect role for her, because she proved she has that capability to use this armor. And got somebody complaining one time about, because nobody existed in the Mirage version. That was obviously with the inspiration. And they said, nobody's not a black girl from the street. She's a white male cop. You guys, of course, we ruined their childhood again. I'm sorry. I was never there for your childhood, so I don't know how I could ruin it unless Lita and Renette teach me how to time travel. Right. I'm not gonna ruin anybody's childhood, but nor could you ruin mine, because it exists as it was. And I wrote back. I said, look, you're right. Nobody was a white cop male in the Mirage version, and IDW does beautiful reprints of all the classic stuff. And guess what? If you buy that, you're still going to find that nobody exists and is a great character. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been inspired to create Angel as nobody, because I too loved that character. Just like we changed Rat King a little bit, because to me, actually, the original Rat King in Mirage is so important to me and such an important character. I didn't want to emulate that. I deliberately went away from that because I wanted that one to stand alone as it is. I mean, let's make our own, because that one's too, like Sophie said, sometimes you want to be able to stay a fan of something. And when you start creating them, you're still a fan, but it kind of feels different sometimes. You feel a different kind of responsibility outside of just enjoying the fandom. And I said, so if you want that, we have reprints. We have them in black and white. We have them in color. We have director's cuts. We have ultimate editions. You can find that anybody in so many places. But guess what? In the IDW main ongoing, she is a young black lady who's a tough street girl, and she's our nobody. Period. That's just how it is, and you don't have to like her. I'm not telling anybody to like anything. I'm not even telling anybody to read it. If you don't like it, don't read it. Move on. But why dwell on negativity or dwell on really useless comparisons? It doesn't make any sense to compare things like that to me. And again, I have nothing against people's opinions. I 100% believe in 100% freedom of speech. 100%. I believe people just need to learn how to grow up. And if you don't like something, you don't want to see something, you don't hear, move on. There's so many choices now. There's so many choices.
There are so many versions of this property.
Yeah,
if you don't dig the new movie, if you don't dig this, like,
move on. I won't get offended. I don't get offended.
Yeah.
I think people get too offended nowadays. I don't get offended. If you don't like it, I'm not forcing you to. And I don't, you know what? If one person reads what I write, I feel excited because at least somebody somewhere enjoys it. That if it's thousands or even more, that's even better. But to me, Turtles is bigger than me, always will be. I'm just a guy that's just been lucky to write in it. I'm sure Sophie feels the same way. Someday there's not going to be a Tom Waltz and a Sophie Campbell, and other people are going to be writing Turtles. You know,
Yeah.
and it's still going to be important to people, but it will be different than what we wrote. And there's going to be people who are reading ours someday saying, hopefully they won't, but if people continue to be people, in 10 years, 20 years, people are going to say, you ruined my childhood, the childhood we gave them with our version.
Hey,
So,
where's Jennica?
yeah. So I always tell people,
You may
just
know
don't
me, white cop again.
I love passion. I love fans that are passionate. I love debates. I will debate too. You know, I'll debate all day long about Blade Runner or something that I really like too. But in the end, I also feel like you need to respect. There's things change. Change is constant. We said that from the beginning, and you don't. Nobody's forcing you to
Yep.
follow something, or they're just not. And if you act like when people lash out like that, I'm like, why are you so helpless? Don't be helpless. That to me, that makes I feel almost bad for them. Like, are you so helpless you can't see past the thing you don't like to the other things that are so many things that are out there that you like. And just so everybody knows, there's no secret Turtles behind the scenes industry, big industry Illuminati woke SJW meetings where we're planning stuff
I don't know. We don't invite you to those
well, I
meetings.
might not be invited. Yeah, maybe that's the thing. But I mean, that's not how it works. It just isn't. Now, and we carefully consider all ideas. And there's sometimes that there are ideas where we're like, whoa, pull it back. It's just too much because we don't want to. Once it becomes about you and not the characters, because I write characters, I hate what they do. But if I didn't hate what they're doing, they wouldn't be an effective character, would they? They should be vile. And so sometimes what you have to do, especially like writing horror, when I used to write Silent Hill, the video games and the comics, the stuff in there is horrifying because I was like, what would horrify me more than anything else? And I would think, I'm like, oh God. And then I was writing it, I'd be cringing. I'm like, oh, this is so bad. But I knew that if this is horrifying me, it's gonna horrify somebody else. But if the story works, then there's maybe some resolution or some connection or something therapeutic in that horror. So that to me is the thing. But Angel is probably definitely one of my top ones. But Sophie mentioned it. Going back to your question, it takes me forever to get to an answer.
Yeah.
When we started Armageddon Game, we talked about cherry picking from different iterations. I really hadn't dove into to the Archie stuff. I mean, I was familiar with it. It's kind of tangentially, but I really hadn't dug in because I was already when we did the urban what was it called Urban Legends, the image reprint with the colors.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That one's weird. So I thought, okay, I Archie's and I go Archie's is even weirder, but I love it. And so Archie's was like to me, Archie's was great because it was such a paradox. It was like this looks like 80s, Fred Wolf cartoon. But there was some killing going on in those books. Some of that stuff was horrifying in the Archie's run. I felt like I think they had less rules back then than we do now. And but the characters that really jumped out at me were the Nova Posse. Because I'm reading through and I'm like, wait, who are these? I mean, this is like Guardians of the Galaxy. And they were only in a couple issues, and I thought, okay, this is my kind of team. This is a kind of group I want to bring into the book. When the rule for Armageddon Game was at the beginning, what did they tell us, Sophie? They said, get people off the board. Get as many people off the board as you can. We did the opposite. We brought people.
It didn't work.
we just brought people back on the board. And I'm hoping to revisit the Nova Posse again someday. But that was a group to me that not that they were bad how they were initially. I actually followed a lot of the original mannerisms and the dialogue tweaked or what's the word I think the other word. See, I need more coffee today. But how they spoke, let's say it that way. But I felt like they were maybe just underserved at the time. I felt like there's so much more you could do with these characters. And so for me, that was one of the most fun things about Armageddon Game was kind of bringing these characters in and feeling like I had a pretty clear palette to work with because they only had a couple issues of Adventures and Archie's. So those, as far as most recently, characters I really, really liked writing a lot.
I'll tell you some of my favorites that you guys revamped. The neutrinos, because they're the worst
Yeah.
characters ever. And to
What?
rename them and be cool is
Come
amazing.
on, they're adorable.
But again, proof. Here's proof of, and I'm like Sophie. Matter of fact, when I started talking to Marvel and stuff, and I'm happy to write Wolverine, but the first thing they asked me is, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to do what Tom King does. I want to take some of these like B, C, D list characters and see if I can't make them an A list character. That's a fun
I
chapter.
love that. I love doing that.
You know how he'll take like, I mean, Supergirl was obviously a big character, but what he did recently with her was like, wow, more people come to Supergirl because he just took this character and told a story people weren't expecting. Vision, he did that with Vision, and with the neutrinos, I saw the neutrinos the first time. My oldest, my son, had old VHS tapes of the Fred Wolf stuff, and my younger daughter started watching the tapes, and so I'm watching it with her, and I watched the teenage, what are they, hot rodding teenagers from Dimension X or whatever
Yeah.
it was. And I remember thinking, that is the goofiest thing I've ever seen. But there's always something underneath. And I thought, but that is pretty horrifying, the idea that teenagers are escaping a place that is all, I mean, because think of the world right now. Think of the world right now. You are escaping a place that is a constant warfare. Is that science fiction? No, that's just a reflection of reality in many parts of the world. Sorry, it is. And usually the people who are getting killed are innocent. And I felt like those teenagers escaping, to me, was a kind of a, as silly as it was rendered and produced, it was still underneath that. There was a scary story there to me that applies to the real world. So when we started talking about doing going to Dimension X for the first time with Krang, they popped in my brain. But my thought was, but they are goofy and they are silly, so it can't work that way in our comic. But we didn't want to lose the entire aesthetic, so we kept, the 50s Elvis hair or whatever, and the
I love that.
yeah. But I said to the artist at the time, I said, but they're the neutrinos by way of John Connor in Terminator.
Right.
Oh,
They're
that's
like,
fun. Sure.
yeah. And so that was all I said was like, imagine if all the characters in Terminator were neutrinos. And that's where the design came about. But then we just started to flesh them out from there without losing the original aspects of them that make them so precious to so many fans, including myself.
Sophie, a favorite of mine that you revamped, and I'd love to talk about this just because which where the book is now, is Armaggon making him. I mean, I like the original, but like I feel so much more invested and interested in what you're doing with him. I guess my question is, what made you think like he's the right final big bad for the series?
Because two of my favorite things are sharks and time travel. And I was like, like Tom, I'm not like super familiar with the Archie stuff. Like I had read like, the Future Shark trilogy. I had read like, the issue with like Worm and Scumbug. Like I'd read just like bits and pieces here and there. But as soon as I was like, I wanted to do like a time travel thing, I was just like, oh, Armageddon is a time traveler and he's a shark, right? Which I love. I don't know if you can see, but I have this like gigantic jaws.
Oh yeah.
It was like it's about to bite your head.
Yeah. I have an even bigger one in a different room that's like 4 feet long. It's ridiculous. But anyway, yeah. So I was like, okay, it's a shark, which I love. Time traveling shark. But I always felt like the original Armaggon, like he's like, this is, I'm not trying to disparage Steve Murphy. I love him, but the original Armaggon, he's kind of nondescript a little bit. Like he's just like I'm time traveling to get like Hitler's brain or something like that. And like him being a shark is just kind of incidental.
There's some goofy shit in that book.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's bananas.
It is all like that, huh, Sophie? Like the Gang of Four is so goofy, but then in their final, like they're getting shot out of hell or shooting somebody to hell. I can't remember in Archie's. It was like super violent.
Yeah, there's some really violent stuff. Like, because that was like still under Mirage. Like, even though Archie was like publishing it, so I think it was just kind of, anything goes.
Hitler's brain. I don't know. Let's put that in there. Like it's very much.
Yeah, right. Like Hitler's brain is like what?
Yeah,
Like,
sure.
Steve,
I don't know.
you okay? you know. But yeah, so and but I knew that I couldn't just, I don't know. I didn't want, like, I wanted a big villain that wasn't like any other ones that we'd seen yet, you know, where, it's like, well, what if he doesn't talk? We haven't really had this kind of like, you know, like eldritch, like Skynet kind of
Yeah.
kind of adversary. And it just like, I started doing sketches. That's kind of how I come up with a lot of stuff. I'll just start I'll just start doodling. And some of my initial Armaggon sketches were, more traditional, where he's just like a humanoid kind of guy. There's one version of the Armaggon story that involved, there's this like side character, Amy the shark, in some of my issues, and she's in Sheena's band after the bomb. She's
Oh
one
yeah.
of the guitarists in the band, and so like originally she was going to be Armaggon, and a future version of Amy was going to come back, kind of like Cable, like an evil Cable, and she had like a bionic like yellow arm or whatever, and like the tubes that Armaggon has, and for whatever reason it she got scrapped, and that story kind of became like a different story. um but anyway, yeah. So, but I always had that the shark on the brain, time traveling shark. And yeah, so my initial sketches for the new Armagon were more traditional, like kind of humanoid. And I was like, I don't, it doesn't work. Because like, what if he's just a big shark that flies through like space time, And like, I'm not like very like science smart, but I love like reading about physics anyway.
Well, you
You
fooled
know?
me because half the time I'm like having to look up what you're writing. I'm like, I don't even know
So
this.
yeah, I love like, physics and like quantum mechanics stuff. And so, that, and then I kind of like expand on that, like, well, what if he like eats time? Like the Langoliers. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that Stephen King thing. Love the Langoliers. And like, they have like those like rotating like chainsaw teeth. And I was
Hmm.
like, what if Armagon just has these, like floating teeth that just like come out of his head, and he just like devours time. And that was kind of the basic idea. And then, I like stuff that's scary. And so I just tried to make him like really scary. And in the Archie books, it never really explains like how or why he time travels, and like what the cybernetics are like on his body, and why he has these
Right.
like jet engines on his shoulders and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know what that is, but like, what if he's just this biomechanical monstrosity, um and that, yeah, that was pretty much the basic idea, just like a Langolier giant shark that eats time.
And
And
see now, and when I read it, what I was thinking is because we always joke, and it kind of goes back to Terry Pratchett, but like they say, like really we live on a giant turtle that's carrying
mm,
reality
I
on its
love that
back.
title.
I
Yeah.
go, well, if you're living on a giant turtle swimming through space, there might be a giant shark out there somewhere too.
right, right.
So
Yeah, it just, and it seemed to fit like the time travel story I wanted to tell, where he's like, eating parts of the turtle's history, and stuff like that. It just kind of came together.
and again, seeing the count come together. So writing Armageddon Game, obviously you write a big outline, and then as any story or any storyteller will tell you, the characters go, nope, we're going this way, nope, going this way. Sorry, you thought you were going to do this. I'm going over here. Just the story will tell you. So parts of Armageddon Game would evolve and change as I would one have new ideas or see what was coming from Sophie and then the Alliance book. But Sophie was huge in helping me get to the finale because I was trying to deal with, okay, how do I bring this all together, and then introducing this idea that speaking of time travel or how things affect people through time, this idea that in a way, and Sophie can explain it better, that the turtles are this almost like gravity unto themselves, that they draw people toward them. Not necessarily always a good thing.
Yeah.
And so to me, it was this helped me figure out how to come to the kind of the final solution to Armageddon Game, where all the magic, because the magic wasn't originally in the original idea of Armageddon Game. Sophie brought that in, the idea with the different amulets and totems and all that. And it was the kind of thing I looked at, I go, okay, you just helped me out a lot, because this helps me push the plot forward on my side too. And I wasn't thinking this way, but it makes sense. So let's keep it going. And so the story evolved. Armageddon Game literally evolved as it went along. And the Armaggon aspect, this idea that there's dangers out there that are at the quantum level, and at the whatever is the opposite of the quantum level, the universal level, I guess, that affect these individual characters together and as a group. That helped me kind of come up with that group decision, the group method, and the way they defeated Rat King. And and then it was also allowed me to tie a loose end that drove me nuts forever. Was we left Chi-Yu out in space in a Ghostbuster trap all this time. So that was at the very beginning of this thing. I said, I'm going to find a way to. Chi-Yu is the final solution here. And he's pissed. And I go, but how we get there, we'll figure it out as we go. And that's exactly what we did. And that was thanks to what Sophie brought into it, because then I was able to kind of play with this idea that there was with Cherubay and her brethren, the four winds, that they were all kind of tied into this grander, multi-dimensional, multi-universal plan that the Turtles happen to be a big part of. I always think of the Turtles kind of like, to me, the Turtles are kind of like Earth in Marvel or the DC comics, right? It's always like all these universes and stuff, but it's always Earth causing the most problems or coming up with the most solutions. They're always, and so for me, the Turtles, in the Turtles universe, there's so many characters and there's so many things you can play with, but always it revolves around the Turtles and their dad, somehow. And when Sophie came up with this gravitational explanation, it was like straight out of like
radiant gravity.
Yeah, it was straight out like interstellar kind of thing, where I don't understand it totally, but it's cool. It's kind of like I watch Interstellar and he's in that room with the books and stuff. I don't totally Tesseract. I go, I don't totally get what's going on here, but I can buy it. I can go with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I love that. Yeah, I love that nonsense, that like space time crap. Another thing. Speaking of like loose end, or like loose ends, or like unfinished storylines or whatever. One of the things I was most hung up on, like yours was Chi-Yu, mine was Q&A. Back in issue 50.
And again, we have to blame Bobby for that. Q&A.
I know.
And I said,
because I thought it was you. And I was always just kind of like blaming you in my head, just like, why did he do this? Yeah, and I asked Bobby, I was like, Bobby, like, what does it stand for? Like, it has to stand for something. Like, DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid. So what does Q&A stand for? He's like, nothing. I don't know. I just thought it looked cool.
He goes, it's the soul stuff. I go, but what do you mean?
I'm like,
we'll figure it out someday.
No, it's not. It can't just look cool with you can't just put a Q in place of a D and have it be something. Yeah. So yeah, that was like a huge driving.
And then when you explained it to me, again, it was like reading Super History Foot Clan. I'm like, I'm so glad she did it, because it's so much more than
I'm gonna make this nonsense crap that Bobby threw in on the last page of issue 50. Like, it's gonna make sense, and it's gonna be part of the story now.
Bobby.
Give me a break, Bobby.
It was Bobby's idea. I was the one that got the death threats and stuff, but it was Bobby's idea for what happened to Donatello in issue 44.
Oh my God. It's so crazy that, like, it's amazing. It's amazing that people are like so invested and like take it super seriously. But it's like, on the other hand, I'm just like, did you really think we were gonna like kill him off?
It was chaos.
After the only issue I couldn't get a fine. It's the only issue of this entire 150 series I couldn't get a first printing of.
It's bananas. That is bananas to me.
And to this day, people will say, come up to me and say, I'm mad at you. Why? And I'll say, because you killed Donatello. And I'm like, but I didn't really.
Yeah, he was never actually dead. Come on.
But the truth is this. So we knew he was going to get hurt. It was Bobby. Let's just see how far we can push it. Like, almost like that he almost dies. And I thought, yeah, that's a good idea. And I didn't think, again, to Nickelodeon's credit, I thought they would say nope. And that's a pretty violent scene. And there's actually, for what you don't see, you do see enough where you're like, eh.
There's like, I'm sorry to cut you off, but there's like a panel that Corey drew where it's like you can like kind of like see inside of his shell or whatever.
Mm,
And
yeah.
like it's all in shadow or whatever, but there's like blood and just like
Even the
imagine
silhouettes are
just
like,
like
holy shit! Like what you guys
Yeah.
like, it's
right.
a
And
silhouette. You're like, oh, like
like
yeah,
just imagining like
yeah.
like the biomass that's like inside that shell. It's just like, ugh, it's disgusting. I love it.
And when I wrote Bebop, or one of them said to the other one, like, "Did you? Ooh, I didn't think that would be inside there."
Right, it's so
You're kind of like,
gross.
to me, because
Yeah,
that's like that would be like that's a gross thing to say.
yeah, it's
I was like,
disgusting.
that grossed me out to write it, so people are gonna get grossed out. But I mean, like the next day, I come into the office at IDW, and all I was worried about was issue 50 because issue 50 was such a big milestone.
Right.
One of the milestones so from the very beginning there were certain milestones I knew I wanted to hit. It was the reincarnation aspect, Shredder's return. Ultimately, I wanted Splinter to kill Shredder and take over the Foot Clan. There were just different things. A female turtle somewhere along the line, and ultimately, Splinter sacrificing for everybody in the end. And so it was one because this story. What I realized at the end when I wrote issue 100 and I said the end, I wrote, I just told this whole thing was Splinter's story. Didn't realize it until I was done. I realized, all of this, began and ended was, Splinter, worrying about his family, and that's how it ended for my run. But yeah, the gosh, I can't remember what we're talking about now. Oh, the death, Donnie. So the next day I come into work and somebody comes out to my desk and goes, "Hey, USA Today is on the phone for you." I'm like,
What?
I was like, USA Today, why? And they said, because you killed Donatello.
Oh
And I
my
was like, because I was
god.
worried, I wasn't even thinking the impact it would have. We knew it would be shocking, but like Sophie said, are we gonna kill one of the turtles?
I know. Do you think like Nickelodeon is gonna let us
Yeah,
do that like
you know,
forever?
and I was like, and I was like, okay. And so they were and then I started getting death threats from all over the
Oh
place.
my
And then
god.
and
So
then
crazy.
yeah, threatened my family to kill my family. And
Oh
then
my
and what
god.
happened was this is where you understand, as a creator, you kind of get frustrated sometimes when like the licensor is really protecting the brand. But this
Yeah.
is like a really good lesson into why they have people who are protect the brand. Because what happens is you and I and all of us, we're nerds, geeks. We understand multi-universes, multiple iterations, different versions. Not all parents do. And at the time, the 2012 Serial show was just like doing gangbusters.
Right.
And so parents were calling because they were saying, how are they going to explain to their kid that their favorite character is now dead?
Oh my
And I
god.
was like, but it's apples and oranges. This has nothing to do with your show.
Oh my
But it showed me,
god.
like, because parents might go into the store. I'm not buying you toys from that line because it's a violent
Right,
show.
right.
Like,
Oh my god.
so, but then the sales went through the
Right.
roof. And
Now money talks, right?
well, Ted Adams came to my desk later on in the day. He goes, "Can you kill another turtle next month?"
Oh my god, it's so crazy. I had no idea about like the aspect with the parents.
Oh
Like
yeah.
that is
And
mon
it was a good lesson for me, and that's
yeah,
you worry about like sometimes the brand people step in, but they're not just worried about comics; they're worried about turtles
right.
overall.
Yeah,
And
the
this is where
whole
I was like,
yeah, that's
yeah, I see why.
yeah, no, I get it. That is bananas. That's so nuts. Oh my God. The only thing I ever get death threats for is like having too many girls in the comic or whatever, you
I
know?
was, I was
And that's one thing I'm the most proud of. The thing I'm most proud of is, and this is the truth. Sophie will back me. Greg will back me. People might not believe it. We don't go into this thing thinking, "Oh, we need more girls or we need more this." It's just like those characters tell you who they are. They just tell you who they are. And I want a diverse cast because I live in Linda Vista, San Diego, California. My neighbors are Vietnamese. I have neighbors from Ethiopia over here. I have white neighbors over here, black neighbors, everybody. And guess what? We're the Linda Vista people. We all get along. We love each other. We take care of each other. I don't even know what my neighbors are saying half the time. They don't even know what I'm saying half the time. But I got their back and they got mine. I know it. That's really what the world is. The media is
Yeah,
going to make you
absolutely.
think everybody hates each other and everybody's at it, and that's all you see is the bad stuff. But most people just want to get along. They just want to be happy. They got families. They got lives. They
They
don't
just
care.
want to live.
Yeah, and that's when we tell these stories. That's the world I want represented. The world I see every day. And so I don't want everybody to be a dude. I don't want everybody to be a girl. I mean, some people are going to be whatever they want to be in between. It doesn't matter to me as long as they feel like a real living character, and those are real living characters based on real living people. Even like in the Ronin right now, like the new Turtles. One is based on one of my sisters who was is a little tougher than the rest of us, and that's Moja. Moja's kind of like the tough sister that's got your back, but then she's the one that only I'm allowed to pick on you. That sister, right?
Right.
And then Yi is a lot like my daughter. She's a little more of a. We wanted to bring in some modern sensibilities into Ronin, right? And that's only because we were inspired by the fact that our main book and Turtles just over the years has always kind of embraced the weirdness in people, because the funny thing is weirdness is normal because we're all weird. I'm,
Right.
I'm in a weird in a way Sophie's not. Sophie's weird in a way I'm not. You're weird in a way we're all weird, right? In our own way. But I always feel like the weirdness is the one thing we all got in common, is the difference. And I know that doesn't make any sense. It's a contradiction the way I'm saying it, but that's the truth. But what happens is, I think we have the most problems in this world when people say, you all got to be like me,
Yeah.
or we all got to be like this. I'm like, boring and, and chaotic. I don't want it like that. I want a diverse world. I want it to be exciting and different. And every time you go somewhere, you see something new and exciting. Otherwise, just go stare at yourself in the mirror. And maybe that's why this is going on so much. Because people want to see themselves, and like, stop looking at yourself. Look at other people. Enjoy them, because we're all in this together. And when this ends, where we go next, we're all in it together, because it doesn't end here. And so all this crap you do now, good or bad, is going to carry over. So you might want to think about that.
I know, Tom, I have kind of an out of left field question for you, but I've wondered this. When you did the reincarnation story, did you ever have a temptation to name the turtles then?
No, no. It's funny. I almost deliberately went into it saying we'll never name. And there was times Sophie was thought about naming at one point.
Yep. I had a name.
It's even come up when we were ready. Yeah.
Yep.
But then they said to us, and they never said we couldn't. It was just something Bobby and I early on just felt like, I don't know if I want to name them, because but I don't feel like they shouldn't have names. I felt like, let's let the readers name them in their own mind. Even like, it's the same idea, like, and I hate to go back to Ronin, but in Ronin, anybody who's read Last Ronin, Mikey is alone, but his brothers keep appearing to him. They're talking to him. And Kevin and I deliberately have said from the start, we're not going to tell anybody they're ghosts. They're not ghosts. They're in his mind. We haven't even completed. Even when I'm writing it, I can't completely decide what they are. But I'm like, that's one of those things where I'm like, I don't need to tell you. The reader can decide for themselves whatever works best for them to get through this story. Are they the ghosts? Is he crazy? Is it something else? It doesn't matter, as long as it works for you. Then I'm happy that way.
Absolutely. I think.
Go ahead, please.
But yeah, like I was saying, like I had a name picked out for Donatello, like that he was going to learn in my final arc, right? And it was going to be like I think I had it where like he learns what his old name was in his past life, but he doesn't tell anybody else. It's like this secret that he keeps to himself. But yeah, Bobby was like, because this, I've been like working on this stuff for forever. And I think Charles was involved with it at one point too. But yeah, it was kind of just this thing that just kind of got pruned out. It wasn't like, no, you can't name his past life. It was just this things like, yeah, like once the story starts shaping up, it's like, you don't really need this,
I like not knowing that, frankly.
Yeah, I think that's that's the right choice, is not naming their past lives. Yeah.
There's two other quick things I wanted to call out. So, Sophie, I guess similarly with Armaggon, what made you want to focus on Donatello for this final arc?
That was kind of like, it wasn't the plan, because I feel like Donatello is kind of like my least favorite turtle. They're all great, obviously, but Donatello, for whatever reason, like I'm always all about like Leonardo, Raphael, that kind of stuff. But just the fact that like Donatello is into science, and then we started having him like get into magic, and how like magic and science are kind of the same thing. And it just kind of grew organically, like Tom is saying, it just kind of, even if you have like other ideas initially, like, oh, the whole turtle group should go on this adventure with the Armaggon stuff, because it's like, you want to see all the turtles in like this quote unquote final story, but just like the way it shook out, it was just like, yeah, like Donatello, like he has like Venus with him and stuff, but like it was just this thing where it's like Donatello is kind of like alone in this in a way.
Yeah.
And
What I liked about it is to compare it to like Last Ronin, like so like Mikey was the last Ronin, and the reason
Mhm.
why is because he was the most interesting arc because he had the furthest to go to get there.
Yeah.
With Donnie and the magic stuff, like I think it's interesting because Donnie had the furthest to go to get
right,
to this point.
Yes.
right,
Like you see Leo on
100%.
the journey that's less surprising, but like for Donnie to do it, it's really an interesting evolution of his character.
Yeah. And I'm glad because that Sophie's kind of tying up a plot point that we've been playing with since the beginning, where he was always the skeptic, always the
Yeah.
one saying there's no reincarnation, even to the point where one of my favorite scenes is when he discusses teleportation with the Fugitoid, when they're over in Planet Neutrino, and he's saying, "Oh, my dad thinks we're reincarnated. It's crazy." And the Fugitoid talks about, there's a balance between science and faith that people don't want to recognize sometimes. He goes, "We do all the math to get you through this teleporter, but we don't know how your essence goes, but
Right.
it does. Somehow it does, and we just have faith that it's going to happen." And he says, "So why is it so strange that maybe your souls travel through time to this body?" He's saying, "I'm not.
Q&A.
It's a Q&A. That's it. Now
Right,
we know. Now we
that's it.
know." But you're right, and I'm glad you brought that up about the Ronin, because that was a big reason, and it's proved out with what Sophie's writing right now, why we didn't pick Donatello as the Ronin, because of the science side of him and the technical side. We felt like it couldn't be that story that it is with Mikey, fighting through the streets. It's almost gritty, martial arts action, because Donnie would be, I'm in the future and I can come up with all these gadgets and all these gizmos to do this
Very
thing.
different story. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we said that just would feel it felt too on the nose, just like if it was Raph being
Yeah.
the Ronin, it's too on the nose because he's already angry and upset.
Right. It's like the character who doesn't want to be there is the way you should go.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Another thing I want to bring up too, Tom, is that maybe my favorite thing, or at least one of my favorite arcs throughout the entire series, is just the Michelangelo's character evolution when Splinter's in the Foot Clan. Just it came about so naturally. It never felt like he was being pushed in direction to one. It's just like the idea that Mikey would be the one to stand up against Splinter's darker turn. I thought like, wow, this is such an interesting way to use this character. I still love that as
Yeah, he's been. I think that's one thing we're all really proud of with Mikey in our series is he's always been. He's fun and he's goofy, and that's his natural tendency. But he's always kind of been I think the linchpin, really the the center for the family,
the
because
heart of the team. He's the heart of the team.
whenever they start fighting, he tries to be the peacemaker, but he's not just the peacemaker. Like, guys, don't fight. He's like, you guys are being stupid.
Yeah.
And for him to say that, they pay attention. They're like, if we get to the point where we push this guy to lash out or get mad or rebel, then we've probably crossed more than one line to get here, because Mikey's pretty tolerant, and he's very sensitive about things, obviously. But I always felt like, yeah, that I like that he was the first one when Splinter took over the Foot Clan, being like, I'm out.
Yeah, love that.
And the one that goes to be alone is the one that least likes to be alone. And then he, and you witness that as he tries to go to the mutanimals and stuff until he finally reunites with the family. But he was the first one, innately he understood the dangers, because Leo's gonna follow, Raph's like whatever, Donnie was probably thinking maybe they got some cool stuff I can play with over there. They're not thinking about I think he's a human first, Mikey. He's always human first. And I think he saw this is not good. If it was bad before, how is it good now? And he was the first one out. But I also really loved they did this in one of the side stories, where one of the stories brought him were the orphans, and the orphan characters. Karai was like, well, the old fashioned Foot Clan way is we train them to be foot ninjas. Either they make it or they die. They can't. There's no in between. You're either going to be with us or you're dead. And it was Mike, and Splinter was kind of going in that direction, And
Yep.
it was Mikey who reminded him, Dad, these are kids, and I'm not going to let you do that to them. They're going to let them make up their mind who they are. Let them live in a world where they don't have to be what the society is telling them to be, or in this case, the clan is telling them to be. Let them be who they want to be, and in a way, he's kind of reminding that's what you've always done with us until now, until you took over, until you went over to the dark side. That's how you always treated the four of us, including giving them the four bandanas. That was important. That those just represented their something about their personalities. It so happens it was their favorite colors in their past life, but it's his way of saying we're a clan and we're one, but you're also each individuals. And I don't want to stunt your growth, you know. And it was kind of, in a way, that was kind of maybe pushback against the Mirage idea that he was just training him to, for this vendetta, which we then revisit in Ronin, but then we see how that turns out in Ronin too, to the point where it is the one that's the most human who has to solve it in the end, and it's Michelangelo. So to me, I've always seen Michelangelo, we could say party dude and whatever, and the Fred Wolf cartoon is kind of its own thing, and that's kind of what he was. But there's always, to me, if somebody's that happy, genuinely happy, then I think they're very human. I think but they're human in a way that they appreciate everything that comes along with humanity, good or bad, and isn't afraid to say this is fun, and also not afraid to say this is bogus, and if the fun guy is saying this is bogus, you might want to step back and go, it probably is bogus, and that's who our Mikey is, and I think they did a really good job with that later on after we left. Mikey's continued to kind of be that character that finds a solution without having to knock you over the head with it, and he hits you in the heart with it, and that's probably even more effective.
I always end these podcasts by asking favorite turtles. I've done that with both of you already, and it's whatever. So I figured I'll do this. Name your favorite turtle, but also the favorite story you've gotten to tell with them throughout this 150 run. Tom, we can start with you. Favorite turtle and the favorite story you've gotten to tell with them.
It's hard for me. They're like my babies. Like Kevin says, I'm a stepdaddy now, and Sophie's step. So it's like your babies. I'll say this. I mean, I've always, as far as like when people ask me, I always say I really like Leonardo. I like the aesthetic of the two katanas. I like the color, everything. And I wish I could be like Leo. If you haven't guessed, I'm a lot more like Michelangelo. That's what my wife always says. You're too goofy to be Leo. So I think for me, but I base my answer on who I relate to the most. And like I said, I didn't realize I was writing Splinter's story until the end. So to me, all 100 issues for me were important because I'm a dad now. I kind of look like Splinter at this point, a little more gray than I used to be. So I kind of came, if I had started writing this 10, 20 years earlier than I did, it would probably be more of a turtle centric answer. But I was the old dad that worries about my kids and my family and shelter and all those things. And so I feel like the favorite aspect of this is I felt like I told an honest story about a dad who isn't perfect, but really has the best intentions. Doesn't mean he doesn't stumble along the way, and that to me is what the main ongoing represents for me as far as like one specific character in that family. It would be that. But I also, what, I'm not gonna lie, I really liked how we handled Casey Jones. I thought Casey Jones became a much different character in some ways, because he didn't start out as this crazy psychotic vigilante. He had those aspects, but I think them allowing us to make him younger and kind of giving a background that he might not normally have. And again, I say that saying I love Casey Jones and Mirage. I love Casey Jones and all the other iterations, but there was something I think a little more vulnerable about our Casey Jones. Yep. that I found both refreshing but also challenging to write. So I know that's another character that I felt like we've done some service, and I think some cool stuff coming with Casey pretty soon too. That we finally kind of gotten to. This is his turn now. Let's tell some really cool Casey Jones stories. But I have to say, probably Splinter is my favorite turtle. I know that's a weird answer, but
it's a good answer. Yeah. Sophie, favorite turtle and story you've gotten to tell them.
Springboarding off of Casey Jones, he's probably my biggest regret of my 50 issues because I had this whole story for Casey because he is like one of my absolute favorites. And I had this whole story where he like, I think I talked to you like a little bit about it, Tom, where he goes out west
Mhm.
after, he has this like drunken one night stand with April, and he's realizing that he's like becoming like his father, right?
Yeah.
All that stuff. And then, he was going to meet the scrappy street kid out west named Shadow and stuff like that. And like, I had this whole thing I wanted to do. And it just like, it's just one of those things that just kept ending up on the cutting room floor. It always had to make way for like other stuff. And, I feel like he and Raph, he and Raph, they do have this kind of like hug it out bro moment in one issue that I
Yeah.
did. But I always wanted them to have like something more, like a bigger thing where they like reunite, and it just didn't happen, just didn't come together. So yeah, that's my biggest regret. But
But now we got Mutant Nation, so maybe.
I know you never know. Um, so I don't know. My favorite turtle is Leo, and I think I also kind of regret I never gave it. God, I look back on my 50 issues and I'm just like, ugh, why didn't I do that? Or I wish I could have done this. And I don't know if I gave Leo like any big arcs or big moments or whatever. Um,
I disagree with you. I liked
yeah,
Leo a lot. I actually liked Leo a lot in some of the choir moments in your stories, especially like when Karai was injured. And
yeah, that was fun.
I thought he really handled that situation well. One, I never would have guessed Donnie was your least favorite because the way you write Donnie is so awesome. You're
I've come
smart enough to write Donnie. Donnie for me is a lot of Google searches.
I've come around. I've come around. I've definitely come around on Donnie, obviously. And it's not that I disliked him before, obviously, but
And Leo becoming a teacher, like I thought that was really nice.
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I thought you did a really good job with Leo because Leo felt
Being too hard on yourself.
you're right. No,
I felt
you're
like
right.
I felt with Leo, you were like finally he was with his dad gone, and then we kind of touched on it in Armageddon Game, but that was kind of inspired by what you were doing was in Armageddon Game, you start to feel like, oh, he found another sensei, and it's Shredder,
Right, right.
and Shredder right now maybe feels like he's allowed to follow Shredder because his dad who brought him back sacrificed himself, but by the end of that Armageddon Game, it's Leo steps back and goes, I'm my own person. I'm my own master. I don't need a master right now. And Shredder sees it. He's like, nope, that guy's his own master. I'm fooling anybody who thinks otherwise is fooling themselves at this point. And Shredder said, including himself. And so that was based on what Sophie was doing with Leo, having him step up. He is the sensei now. He is really the master. And so that is a role he is born for, but also didn't just jump into because it was there. He's slowly finding out this is my responsibility. If I'm really going to honor my dad, then I have to become my own master. And I think that worked really well. And then Sophie, going back to what Sophie did with Casey, that was really impactful for me because how many people in this world have parents or people who are custodians to them that had chemical dependencies, whether it's alcohol and drugs, and they hate it, and yet they end up falling into that trap too.
Right.
The very thing they hate the most, they end up doing. And I thought Sophie handled that really well because that's probably more normal than abnormal that would happen.
It happens. But yeah, no, thank you, you guys. You're right. I did do a great job with Leo. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's just I really enjoyed him. Helping like set up the dojo and stuff like that. Like I really like doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's so funny the characters that you guys were least comfortable with, the ones that kind of like stand out the most. Like Sophie, you with Donatello, like ends up being his story. Tom, you were saying like you never quite like the thing about you didn't get about the Turtles origin story is Splinter from the cage, and like I love the 1990 movie. It's my favorite turtle thing anything ever. But the one I've said this many times, the one thing I don't buy is that goofy little rat puppet.
You guys, you guys are
any suspension of
out of your minds. You guys are
so
absolutely.
goofy. That's why
I love little normal rat Splinter learning ninjutsu. Come
I
on.
just can't buy it. I want like
Right.
that's why I like the Hamato Yoshi like cartoon 87 story a little better because I'm like, all right, he's a guy who knows ninja moves. At least I can
Yeah.
do that. So like it's so funny that you guys like the characters that kind of had the biggest problem areas, you end up with a amazing
It's hard. No,
amazing
trust
Splinter
me.
story. And
And
then
like, but that's the fun thing is we can
yeah,
all.
and then Donatello. Yeah.
This is how it should be, right?
Yeah.
You love it, and I never hated it, but I was like with you, where I was like, okay,
Yeah,
that's
it,
cool.
holy
It,
moly. Like, all right, that's a
but,
little yeah.
but for me, it was like, but I didn't want to totally lose it, right? And so to me, it had to be that there was definitely a little rat named Splinter
Yeah.
who who is this before he becomes Splinter, Master Splinter. But a big part of it for me too, also the reincarnation explained how they knew the martial arts. You
Yeah.
know, because we had one of our directives was we weren't going to have them be baby turtles. In the main ongoing, kind of like in the Ronin, we know that these turtles are small and they grow up. If you go back to issue 1 when there's the mutation, I mean they're immediately teenager size because we
Yeah.
want to get right to that. So that was one of my ways of thinking about this was that, well, he hasn't had a lifetime to train them, as they've kind of always implied before. So how would they know this stuff so innately? And then we were able to, and we kind of hinted, everybody kind of filled in the blanks when we showed the reincarnation story, and they go, oh, that's how they know what they're doing because they knew how to do it in a past life. But I wanted to really call it out when I could, and so we did a 30th anniversary special at one point, the anthology, and I got to tell a story in the main book, and it was kind of when Raph first comes back to the family and he's training, he says something like, "I feel like I know how to do this. It's weird. I've done this before," and that's where we get to play with Donnie. Then Donnie's like, "Yeah, well, Dad says we're reincarnated. He's crazy," but then at the same time, Donnie's like, "But we do know how to do this. So how do we know how to do this? There's got to be an answer, right?" And so I think Sophie's like me. One of the rules we've kind of followed is this idea that magic is just like the science we don't understand yet, right?
Right.
What is it? And they say there's the powers and principalities are the things that we're really at war with. We're not at war with each other, meaning there's always something outside that we don't see because we're not ready or capable of seeing these things yet or understanding them. So what do we call them? Magic, gods, and then as time passes, like, oh, maybe they're not gods, maybe they were aliens or whatever. Maybe it's not magic, it's just we didn't understand this element. Now that we understand this element, I mean, watch Oppenheimer. It's almost like I mean, for all the terrible things about the bomb and what happened and what they do, you almost felt like they were saying, oh, let's turn this magic into science. That's how it felt. And I think that was one of the effective things about that movie
Yeah.
was you always get the sense like it was magical till it wasn't, but then they were like, what have we done?
Right.
And that's Donnie is our true scientist, where you're like, why were you testing this, or why are we doing this?
Right.
Because I had to know. And you're like,
Right. Yeah.
sometimes maybe it's better not to know, but
It's like I had to.
yeah,
I had
to
to
go
fix
there.
this, and
Yep, I had to have the answer,
right.
and I think, and obviously, 150's coming out, but one of the things Sophie does really well in this last arc so much is finding that scientist and finding the other side of Donnie that he's been fighting so hard is this idea like you got to have a little kind of faith too. There's just like you're
Yeah.
not going to understand everything, and it's okay.
Yeah,
Because,
you can't control everything.
yeah,
Sometimes you just have to
just ride with it.
let go a little bit.
Well, on behalf of the fans, I want to thank you guys again for telling the most richly detailed history of the turtles ever. So really, like it's a series that I've loved since the start. I was there week 1, getting that first issue. I only missed that one issue 43.
44.
I think I have a first print of 44 around here somewhere. I'll send it to you.
Broke my heart. Anyway, but like you guys have told this amazing story with this amazing continuity, and like, yeah, it's closing up and new cool shit's gonna happen, but like we've got this, and like to revisit and to reread because there's so much stuff in there. So thank you guys and for telling some amazing turtle stories. And
It's been my pleasure.
Yeah, it's been an honor. And you know what? And we couldn't do it without the fans and the people reading and continuing to buy the book.
Absolutely.
And I was telling somebody today, like I said, I was just down in Mexico for the convention down there, and I walked away from that feeling like we're just like the bubble is just going to continue to grow. I don't know if it'll ever burst because the excitement was just palpable. And I mean, obviously for Ronan is a big deal right now, but beyond that, it was like Saturday morning adventures. People were asking questions about Jason coming on board and what can they expect next? And is please say Sophie's not leaving? And is Paul Allard going to write more? And is Eric? You know, there are all these people have their own creators that they like and follow, which just tells me that somehow we've all been in this kind of same groove moving forward. And I mean, Sophie's going to say too, we feel like a family behind the scenes. I mean, to the point where we all get along, we can bicker, we can do all these things that we need to do to make this bigger than us. And I came away from Mexico. It's getting crazy, and we're not done. I mean, I'm excited for what Jason's bringing. I was a fan of Jason's since Scalp, which is one of my favorite comic book runs. So when they announced Jason was coming on board, I was the first one to go, okay, this is going to be cool. And then it was even cooler when they said, and you and Sophie, we're going to give you this book, Mutant Nation, to kind of shepherd in, and it gives us an opportunity to tell a lot more stories, kind of like when we had Universe, you know, before. This idea that there's so much Jason wants to tell, but there's so much more that can be told. We get this opportunity to do it alongside that, along with all the other amazing stuff we got going on. So we're just getting, I feel like, we're 15 years into this, whatever it is now, 13, yes. And we're
crazy to think about.
Just getting started.
How long it's been? That's crazy.
And Sophie's been there since early. So it's we talk about her 50 issues, but Sophie had a lot to do with things happening in the first 100 too. So
yeah, no doubt. Some of the most so much great stuff has happened. Thank you both for being here and doing this, and we'll talk soon. I'm sure there'll be more to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of announcements.
Take care.
All right. See you guys. How do I get out of here?